No one ever expects their life to change in the quiet moments, the moments when the sky is calm, the world is ordinary, and everything seems predictable. But Emily Walker learned that truth on a rainy Tuesday morning, standing in the hallway of St. Clair Medical Center, staring at a door with a silver nameplate she had seen 100 times before. Dr. Adrian Hale, cardiology. She had come for a routine checkup, nothing more. Or at least that was what she believed. What she didn't know was that this visit would pull her into an unexpected story, one filled with tenderness, longing, and the kind of emotional electricity she had only read about in quiet nights with romance novels. Emily was 32, a graphic designer living in Portland, Oregon. She wasn't dramatic, or reckless, or the type to fall into complicated feelings. Her world was simple: work, her tiny apartment, coffee every morning, and the occasional weekend hike with friends. She liked her routine. It made life feel safe. But life rarely asks permission before changing course. As she waited outside Dr. Hale's office, she tried not to think about the tightness in her chest that had brought her here. Or the exhaustion she couldn't explain. Or the strange way her heart seemed to speed up whenever she remembered the doctor's calm voice during her last visit. She told herself it was nothing. Just nerves. Just stress. The door opened. Emily. His voice was warm, steady. Dr. Adrian Hale was in his late 30s, tall, with dark hair slightly out of place, like he had run his hand through it while thinking deeply about something. He carried himself with a quiet confidence, the kind you didn't notice right away but felt in the way he listened, the way he didn't rush, the way his eyes held yours a second longer than most people's. But he was her doctor. Nothing more. That boundary was clear. Or so she kept reminding herself. Emily stepped inside. "Hi, Dr. Hale." He smiled gently. "Adrian is fine. Come in." That small correction, Adrian, always made her stomach flutter. She tried to ignore it. She sat on the chair beside his desk, feeling strangely aware of her breathing. He glanced at her chart. "You mentioned chest pressure and fatigue. How long has that been going on?" "A few weeks," she said softly. "I thought it was just work stress." He looked up, meeting her eyes in that focused way of his. "Stress can cause a lot, but I want to be sure. Let's go step by step, all right?" There was something grounding about the way he spoke. Gentle, but firm. Professional, yet undeniably warm. He began the exam, nothing inappropriate, nothing unusual, but Emily couldn't stop noticing the closeness. The quiet in the room. The soft scent of peppermint on his breath. The way he guided her through breathing slowly, carefully, patiently. When he listened to her heartbeat, she wondered if he could hear the nervous rhythm she was trying so hard to control. After a few moments, he stepped back. "Your heartbeat is a little irregular today," he said thoughtfully. "It's probably nothing serious, but I'd like to run a few tests." Emily nodded, trying to stay composed. "Okay." But something in his expression shifted, concern, but also something softer, something she couldn't name. "Emily," he said carefully, "you're not alone in this. Whatever's going on, we'll figure it out." Her heart tightened, not with fear this time, but with an emotion she knew she shouldn't feel toward a man with a stethoscope around his neck. "Thank you," she whispered. Then something unexpected happened. As she stood to leave, her hand brushed his, a simple, accidental touch. But both of them froze. It lasted only a second. But the air changed. Something unspoken sparked between them, fragile, forbidden, but undeniably real. Emily pulled her hand back quickly. "Sorry, I didn't." "It's all right," he said softly. Too softly. For a moment, neither of them moved. This was the moment her life shifted, quietly, subtly, but completely. Because Emily walked into that room with a doctor. But she walked out with something far more dangerous. Feelings she was not supposed to have. For a man who was not supposed to feel anything back. And as she stepped into the hallway, she didn't notice Adrian watching her leave with an expression that doctors weren't trained for: longing, concern, and something he couldn't allow himself to admit. Not yet. Emily spent the rest of the day trying, unsuccessfully, to forget the moment their hands touched. It had been small, accidental, barely a brush of skin. But her mind kept replaying it like some scene from a quiet romance movie she'd never expected to star in. She told herself she was overthinking. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself he was just being kind. But no matter how many times she tried to rewrite the moment in her head, something inside her refused to calm down. By the time she reached her apartment that evening, the world outside had turned into a soft drizzle. The kind of rain that made Portland feel like it was wrapped in a warm blanket. Emily changed into a sweatshirt, made tea, and opened her laptop to return to work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Dr. Adrian Hale and the strange shift she had sensed in the air. Was it real? Or was she imagining everything because she felt vulnerable? Her phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from an unknown number. No, not unknown. Recognizable. Professional, but familiar. This is Dr. Hale. I reviewed your initial results. Nothing alarming so far, but I'd like to schedule your follow-up sooner than next week. Are you available tomorrow? Emily's heartbeat skipped. Doctors don't text patients personally, do they? Not usually. Not unless there's a reason. She stared at the message for a long moment, unsure if she was reading into it or avoiding something her heart already understood. She typed carefully. Yes, I'm available. His reply came surprisingly fast. Good. 10 a.m. Emily exhaled slowly. Works for me. A pause. Then. And try not to worry tonight. I mean that. She set the phone down, unsure whether the warmth spreading across her cheeks was fear, or something far more dangerous. The next morning, Emily found herself more nervous than she wanted to admit. She wore a simple lavender sweater, soft jeans, nothing special, and yet she kept adjusting her hair, wondering why she cared so much about how she looked. When she arrived at the clinic, the receptionist greeted her with the usual polite smile, but Emily felt her pulse rise again. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to feeling like she was walking into a moment that mattered. Inside his office, Adrian looked up from his desk the second she entered. His eyes softened, not professionally, but personally. Morning, Emily, he said. Thank you for coming in early. She sat down. Of course. You said it was important. He nodded, but his expression was more thoughtful than concerned. I want to run a few additional tests today. Not because I'm worried, I just want to understand everything clearly. Emily tried to breathe normally. Okay. But then something subtle changed in the room. He leaned back slightly, as if debating whether to say something. His voice was quieter when he finally spoke. You look tired, he said gently. Did you sleep at all last night? She froze. It was such a simple question, but the way he asked it felt too sincere, too personal, too close. A little, she admitted. Not much. His brows pulled together with concern. Is it the symptoms? Or something else? Emily hesitated. She couldn't tell him the truth, that her mind had been racing, that she kept replaying their hand touch and his soft voice telling her she wasn't alone. But before she could answer, he looked away, almost like he already sensed the explanation she couldn't give. He stood. Let's begin the tests. The exam room was quiet again, the same soft lighting, the same gentle professionalism, and yet the air felt different. Like both of them were pretending not to notice the distance shrinking between them. When he placed the cold stethoscope against her back, she inhaled sharply. Deep breath, he murmured. She followed his instructions, but her heart betrayed her, beating faster, louder, more uneven. She wondered if he could hear what she was trying so hard to hide. After a long moment, he stepped back, his expression unreadable. Your heartbeat is elevated, he said quietly. Is it anxiety? Emily looked at the floor. Maybe. He watched her carefully. Too carefully. Emily, he said, his tone lower than before. If something is weighing on you, you can tell me. I won't judge. I just want to help. Her chest tightened with emotion she had no idea how to express. Because she wished, deeply, that he wasn't just her doctor. That she could tell him what she felt without crossing lines neither of them should approach. She opened her mouth, searching for words that didn't exist. But before she could speak, someone knocked on the door sharply. A nurse's voice called out, Dr. Hale? We need you urgently in room 3. Adrian's jaw tightened, the moment instantly breaking. I'll be back, he said softly. Please wait for me. And then he was gone, leaving Emily alone with a heart that refused to calm down. But what she didn't know was this. As Adrian walked down the hallway, he wasn't thinking about medical tests. He was thinking about her. And the feeling he was trying so hard, failing so badly, to hide. Emily waited alone in the quiet exam room, listening to the muffled sounds of footsteps and distant voices in the hallway. The silence around her felt heavier than the room itself, pressing against her thoughts, amplifying everything she didn't want to admit. She shouldn't be feeling this way, nervous, restless, strangely aware of every minute that Adrian was gone. He was her doctor. Nothing was supposed to cross that line. And yet, something already had. She tried to steady her breathing, but the moment kept replaying, the softness in his eyes, the concern in his voice, the way he seemed to sense her unspoken thoughts. It felt like they were walking along the edge of something neither of them had chosen, but both of them felt. When the door finally opened, Adrian stepped inside, shutting it gently behind him. He looked slightly flustered, not in a dramatic way, but in the subtle way someone looks after being forced to break away from something important. "Sorry for the interruption," he said quietly. "It's okay," Emily replied, though her voice felt a little too soft. He moved to his desk, but instead of sitting, he stood for a moment, as if deciding how to continue. His eyes lingered on her longer than they should have, not professionally, but curiously, almost protectively. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked. Emily nodded, though the truth was more complicated. "I'm fine. Just a little overwhelmed, maybe." He exhaled slowly. "I can understand that." There was something in the way he said it, something layered, something that felt like he wasn't just talking about her test results. He lowered himself into the chair opposite her. "Emily, earlier, when I asked if something else was bothering you, you hesitated. Is there something you want to talk about?" She stared at her hands, trying to choose safe words, honest words, words that wouldn't cross a line. "I just haven't felt like myself lately," she said. "Physically, emotionally, everything feels harder than it should." He nodded, listening closely. "Life can do that sometimes. Even to strong people." She looked up at him. "You don't even know if I'm strong." His expression softened. "I do. You walked in here trying to hold everything together alone. That takes strength." Emily's heart ached at his kindness. Ached in a way that made her want to look away, but she couldn't. He cleared his throat softly. "Let me explain your preliminary results." He spoke carefully, reassuringly, telling her nothing looked dangerous so far. Maybe stress, maybe exhaustion, but he wasn't convinced that was all. He wanted more tests, more clarity. "Your heart rhythm is slightly irregular today," he explained. "It could be temporary. It could be caused by anxiety or lack of rest. But I'd like to monitor it closely." Emily nodded, but her thoughts drifted to something else entirely, the possibility that the same heart he was analyzing so carefully was reacting to him. After discussing her next steps, he paused, closing the file slowly. "Emily, may I ask you something personal?" Her breath caught. "Okay." He didn't speak immediately. He seemed to be choosing his words one by one, cautiously. "Are you dealing with something emotional? Something outside of your physical symptoms?" Her pulse quickened, not because of stress, but because it felt like he could see right through her. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He leaned forward slightly, not close enough to cross a boundary, but close enough to shift the air between them. "I mean, sometimes the heart reacts to things we don't say out loud. Stress, fear, or something else entirely." For a moment, Emily forgot how to breathe. Was he asking if she was feeling something, because he sensed it? Was this his way of gently acknowledging the small, fragile spark between them? Before she could form a response, someone knocked on the door again, not urgent this time, just routine. A reminder of where they were. A reminder of lines neither of them was allowed to cross. Adrian stood. "I'll be back again in a moment. Please wait here." He stepped out, leaving Emily with a storm of emotions that refused to settle. 10 minutes later, the door opened, but it wasn't Adrian. It was the nurse from earlier. "Dr. Hale had to attend an unexpected meeting. He asked me to give you this." She handed Emily a small handwritten note, something doctors didn't usually do. Emily unfolded it slowly. Please don't leave until I return. There's something important I need to tell you. Adrian. Her breath stilled. Something important. Her heart raced for an entirely new reason, one that had nothing to do with her medical symptoms. Because in that moment, Emily knew this wasn't just a doctor's concern. Something was changing. Deeply. Quietly. Dangerously. And whatever Adrian wanted to tell her might change everything. Emily stared at the note in her hands, reading the words again as if they might change the second time. Please don't leave until I return. There's something important I need to tell you. Adrian. Her heart fluttered in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Doctors didn't write personal notes. They didn't ask patients to wait so they could say something important. And they definitely didn't send messages that hinted at something beyond medical explanation. She placed the note gently on her lap, suddenly unable to sit still. She stood, paced the room, sat again, then stood once more. The quiet, beige-colored walls felt too small to hold everything she was feeling. What could he possibly want to tell her? Was it about her tests? Was something wrong? Or was it something else? Her mind kept shifting between fear and hope, between logic and longing. And with every passing minute, the air around her grew heavier. 20 minutes passed before the door opened again. Adrian stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a slow, deliberate motion. He looked tired, not physically, but emotionally, like someone who had been wrestling with thoughts he wasn't supposed to have. I'm sorry, he said quietly. That meeting came out of nowhere. It's okay, Emily replied, though her voice sounded far calmer than she felt. I got your note. He nodded, swallowing lightly. Good. He didn't sit this time. Instead, he stood across the room for a moment, as if trying to find the right distance, trying to decide which version of himself he needed to be right now, her doctor, or something dangerously close to a man who cared too deeply. Finally, he spoke. Emily, before we continue with anything medical, I need to be upfront about something. Her heartbeat stumbled. He exhaled slowly, like the words he was about to say had been sitting on his chest for far too long. I've noticed. He stopped. Corrected himself. No. I've felt something. And I've been trying to ignore it. Emily's breath caught. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, frustrated by his own honesty. I know the boundaries. I know the rules. I know what is and isn't allowed. You're my patient, and everything in my training tells me to keep a clear emotional distance. A pause. A deeper breath. But lately, I don't feel distant. Emily stood there frozen, her heart pounding so loudly she wondered if he could hear it. He finally looked up, meeting her eyes with a vulnerability she had never seen in him before. When you walked in earlier, before the tests, even before you said anything, I could tell something was weighing on you. And I shouldn't care this much. I shouldn't feel this concerned, not in a way that goes beyond my responsibility. Another breath. But I do. Emily's throat tightened with emotion she didn't know how to hold. Adrian took a careful step closer, not crossing the line, but close enough that she could feel the tension between what was allowed and what was undeniably real. I don't know what you're feeling, he said gently. I don't want to assume anything. But I needed to be honest before this becomes harder for both of us. Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. It wasn't shyness, it was the weight of a moment that felt too important, too fragile to rush. He took another step, slowly, cautiously. I'm not saying this as your doctor. I'm saying this as someone who... He hesitated. Someone who cares about you more than he should. The room felt impossibly still. Emily finally found her voice, quiet, trembling. I don't want you to say something you'll regret. He shook his head softly. I already regret staying silent this long. Her breath trembled. Adrian. Hearing his first name on her lips made something flicker in his expression, something raw, something real. But then he stepped back suddenly, as if reminding himself where they were, who they were supposed to be. I'm not crossing any lines, he said in a steadier tone. And I won't. Not unless. His eyes searched hers. You feel something, too. Emily felt the truth rise inside her before she could stop it, the late-night thoughts, the nervous heartbeat, the way his presence steadied her and unsettled her all at once. But before she could answer, a sharp knock broke the moment once again. A nurse's voice called, "Dr. Hale? The lab needs to speak with you about Ms. Walker's tests." Adrian's eyes closed briefly, frustration moving across his face. "I'll be right there," he called back. He turned to Emily, his voice softer than ever. "I'm not finished with this conversation." He reached for the door, but before leaving, he paused, one hand on the handle, the other brushing lightly against the note he'd written her earlier, still resting on the counter. "Please wait for me again," he said quietly. "There's something else I need to tell you, something important about your results." Her stomach tightened, this time with fear and curiosity tangled together. He stepped out, and the door clicked shut, leaving Emily alone again. But this time, she wasn't just waiting for a doctor. She was waiting for a man who had just admitted he cared for her and who might be about to change her life in more ways than one. The room felt colder after Adrian left, as if every breath of warmth had followed him out the door. Emily sat back down slowly, her hands trembling, partly from fear, partly from the weight of what had just happened. He cared. More than he should. More than he was allowed to. The words circled in her mind like soft echoes she couldn't quiet. She replayed every detail, his voice, the way he struggled for the right words, the way he stepped closer then forced himself to step away. It was the kind of moment she had always thought belonged only in movies or books, not real life, not her life. But now it was real. Undeniably real. And yet another fear tangled with the emotions spinning inside her. What if the other important thing he needed to tell her was something about her health? Her chest tightened again, not painfully, but anxiously. She pressed a hand over her heart, trying to steady the uneven rhythm. Was it stress? Was it something serious? Or was it the impossible truth that her own heartbeat reacted to Adrian more than anything else? She tried to calm herself, but minutes began to stretch. 10. 15. 20. The quiet in the room became heavy, almost suffocating. Finally, the door opened. But it wasn't Adrian. It was the same nurse from earlier, holding a clipboard and wearing a polite, practiced smile. "Ms. Walker, Dr. Hale asked me to move you to room 14. He'll meet you there shortly." Room 14? Not his office, not the usual exam room. "Is everything okay?" Emily asked. "Oh yes," the nurse said quickly. "He just needs a more private space for the next discussion." Private. The word made her pulse jump again. Emily followed her down the hallway, past the busy patient area and into a quieter corridor rarely used except for special consultations. Room 14 was small but warm, with soft lighting and a window that overlooked the hospital garden. The nurse gave her a kind smile. "He'll be with you in just a moment." When the nurse left, Emily exhaled slowly. Her thoughts were a storm, swirling between fear of her results and the emotional confession she'd been waiting to respond to. Before she could gather her thoughts, the door opened again. Adrian walked in, but this time, he looked different. More serious, more conflicted, but also more determined. His eyes locked on hers the moment he entered. "Thank you for waiting," he said, shutting the door gently. Emily nodded, unable to speak. He took a slow breath, as if preparing himself. "I didn't want to discuss your results in the middle of interruptions. You deserve clarity. And privacy." She swallowed. "Okay. I'm listening." He moved closer, holding a few printed test pages, but he wasn't looking at the papers. His eyes stayed on her, searching her face, reading her fear. "First," he said softly, "you're not in immediate danger. I want you to hear that before anything else." Her shoulders loosened, relief sweeping through her chest. "But," he continued, "there is something we need to monitor carefully. Your heart rhythm isn't irregular enough to be classified as dangerous, but it isn't normal either. It's what we call a stress-reactive arrhythmia." Emily frowned slightly. "So, it's stress?" "In part," he said. "Your heart is responding strongly to emotional triggers. Stronger than average. It doesn't mean something is wrong with the heart itself, but it means something is triggering an intense emotional response." Emily's pulse thudded. "Emotional triggers, like anxiety?" "Sometimes," he said gently. "Sometimes anxiety. Sometimes fear. A pause. Sometimes, attraction. Her breath caught. He set the papers down and took a slow step closer. I wasn't sure until today. But when I examined you earlier, your heart rhythm changed the moment I was close to you. Emily's cheeks warmed, her pulse quickening again, proving his point. He lowered his voice. Emily, your heart reacts to me. The air thickened between them, charged with emotions neither of them knew how to tame. She finally whispered, and yours? He didn't answer immediately, but he didn't need to. His eyes said everything. Still, he spoke quietly, honestly. Mine doesn't just react, it complicates everything. Emily felt the truth ripple through her, fragile but undeniable. Adrian. I don't want to make your life harder. You're not, he said softly. My feelings did that long before you knew. Her breath trembled. Then, what happens now? His expression shifted, a mixture of longing and restraint. Now. I have to make a choice. For your health. For my career. And for this. This, she whispered. The thing between us that neither of us intended, but both of us feel. Emily's throat tightened. He slowly reached for the chair in front of her and sat down, leveling himself with her, speaking in a voice barely above a whisper. I need to transfer your case to another doctor. Emily's heart dropped. What? Why? He looked pained. Because as long as you're my patient, I can't tell you how I really feel. Not without crossing a line that could hurt both of us. She stared at him, stunned. So you're choosing distance, she whispered. He shook his head slowly, the smallest, most vulnerable movement. No, Emily. I'm choosing honesty. A beat. And I'm choosing you, if you'll let me. Her breath stopped. Before she could answer, another knock came at the door. Urgent. Interrupting. Ruining the moment again. Adrian closed his eyes briefly, frustrated. Not now. But the knocking continued. Emily looked at him, confused, scared, and full of unspoken hope. And Adrian knew that the next moments could either break everything, or finally begin the truth they had both been denying. The knocking grew louder, sharp enough to cut straight through the tension between them. Adrian looked at the door like it was the enemy of every unspoken word he had been trying to gather the courage to say. I'm sorry, he whispered to Emily, then called out, one moment. But the voice outside insisted, Dr. Hale, it's urgent. He stood slowly, eyes never leaving Emily's. Please, don't leave. Not until I come back. And then he stepped out. Emily sat frozen, her chest tight for reasons far beyond medical concerns. His words echoed in her head. I'm choosing honesty. And I'm choosing you, if you'll let me. Her heart reacted in the way he said it would, painfully alive, hopeful, terrified. A part of her wanted to run before anything became more complicated. Another part wanted to stay exactly where she was, letting everything unfold, no matter how messy or risky the path ahead might be. Minutes passed. Then more. The hallway outside was quiet now, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Emily stared at the window, watching raindrops slide slowly down the glass. Her thoughts scattered in 1,000 directions, what this meant for him, for her, for the strange line they had been walking from the beginning. And then the door finally opened. Adrian walked back in, closing the door gently behind him. He looked exhausted, but relieved. Like he had fought his way back to her. I'm sorry, he said again, running a hand through his hair. Today seems determined to pull me in every direction. Emily stood slowly. It's okay. No, he said softly. It's not. Not when this conversation matters more than any interruption. He stepped closer, not recklessly, not carelessly, but with a quiet certainty she hadn't seen earlier. Emily, he said, voice low, I don't want you to leave thinking that I'm choosing distance. I'm choosing the opposite. But the only way I can be fully honest with you is if you're no longer my patient. She swallowed. So you'd really transfer my case? Yes. He didn't hesitate. I already asked the chief physician. Dr. Rosen will take over. She's excellent, and she'll explain everything when she meets you. Emily stared at him, stunned by the speed, by the decision he had clearly made while she wasn't in the room. You did that now, she whispered. He nodded. I didn't want to lose this moment. Or the chance to tell you how I feel. Not as your doctor, but as a man who. He stopped, searching for words that didn't cross the line too deeply, too fast. As a man who hasn't stopped thinking about you since the first day we met. Her breath trembled. Adrian. He took another step, slow and careful. I don't want to rush anything. I don't want to make assumptions. I just want to know, do you feel something too? Even a fraction of what I feel? Emily looked at him, really looked at the man who had been steady, patient, thoughtful, conflicted, and brave enough to choose honesty over comfort. And her heart answered before her voice did. Yes, she whispered. I feel it too. Adrian exhaled, not loudly, but with a relief so deep it softened his entire expression. A smile formed, tender and unguarded. Then, he said quietly, once you're officially transferred, I'd like to take you to dinner. Somewhere calm. Somewhere without interruptions. Emily felt warmth bloom in her chest. I'd like that. He let out a faint, disbelieving laugh. You have no idea how long I've wanted to hear that. The room felt warmer now, the tension replaced by something lighter, something hopeful and steady. He reached toward her, stopping just an inch away, giving her the choice. Emily closed that inch. He took her hand gently, not possessively, not urgently, just a soft, sincere touch, the kind that said everything without crossing any line. Thank you, he murmured. For staying. She smiled. Thank you, for coming back. As they left the consultation room together, neither of them knew where this new path would lead. They didn't know how complicated it might become, or how delicate the balance between their hearts and their choices would be. But they did know one thing. He wasn't just her doctor anymore. And she wasn't just his patient. They were two people who had found each other in the most unexpected place, in a quiet hallway, between boundaries and emotions neither of them planned for. And for the first time, they both walked forward with something they hadn't had before. Possibility. Hope. And the beginning of something real.